Hi everyone, this is Coco Mocoe.
And this is Nicky.
And you're watching the 5th episode of Share Your Screen. And today's episode is all about my slideshow where I wanted to dive into the ethics of reality TV. And there's a specific reason why I think this is about to be a trending topic in the media.
Yeah, I think this is a really important time to talk about this too, especially in the midst of a writers and actors strike.
Yeah.
Because reality TV is really the gray area of the entertainment industry in that way, where a lot of them aren't technically actors,
Right.
and a lot of these productions don't technically involve writers. So it's interesting to see the supervision or lack thereof on reality TV productions.
Yes, which makes it prime for exploitation, which is why this slide is all about, this question of does reality TV exploit the vulnerable? And I think there's no right or wrong answer. I think anyone watching can come to their own conclusions about it. But I'm just going to kind of lay out the information and give my opinions, and we'll talk about it. So the table of contents is going to be why it matters now, the metrics around reality TV, and then examples of exploitation. I also want to talk about examples of success. There's a reason that so many people apply for reality TV. I also want to talk about kind of this formula for drama that I think all shows follow. And then finances, because that's a really hot topic. And then conclusions and predictions for where I think reality TV is headed.
Okay.
All right, so the first slide in here is why does it matter now? So there's 2 networks that are currently under fire from prior contestants.
Okay.
So there was a lawsuit filed against Netflix and Kinetic Production on behalf of contestants of Love is Blind, one of their most successful reality shows. And essentially what happened is Nick Thompson and Jeremy Hartwell were former contestants, and they claim to have a couple things that went wrong. One, they were deprived of food and water while filming.
That's insane.
Yes, while being given tons of alcohol, which I think is telling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They love to pump people full of alcohol on these shows.
Yes. And actually, the person that Nick ended up with, Danielle Rule, which they have since separated, but she was also referenced in some of these lawsuits when it started last year in 2022.
Okay.
And she had claimed to have suicidal ideation, which she expressed to filming so they had a preliminary kind of assessment before they were picked for the show, where they talked to a psychologist, and she had said that she had suicidal ideation, and she said that she felt like she wouldn't have been chosen for the show if they didn't think that she would be safe there, but that ends up in her claim not being true. So she says that while filming, there's one specific episode which is really sad to see, especially knowing the backstory now, where all of them were in Mexico, and she tested positive for COVID, so she couldn't go to this group event.
Yeah.
And so they sent Nick to the group event, which also makes you think he could have been asymptomatic if he was sharing a hotel room with someone who was positive. And then she had a breakdown where she was in the closet of the hotel because she felt like it was the only place they couldn't film her. And then Nick comes home and finds her in this state in the hotel room. And she was telling them that she was beginning to have suicidal ideation while she was there, and they didn't give her any medical assistance. And also that the contestants felt like, or are claiming, that the assessment they had with the psychologist was more so them gathering information to use against them during filming.
That is exactly what I was about to say.
Yeah.
Because I think too, if they were really looking in their best interest, I think they would know that this is a very high pressure situation, and probably at least warn the person about that if they were someone who suffered from suicidal ideation. But honestly, it seems more like they viewed it as an opportunity to be like, wow, this person is mentally unstable. That's great TV.
They make for great TV. Yeah, I almost feel like it was used to find the most weak in a way, in my opinion. And also, when they were in Mexico filming, they were so cut off from food and water that producers even disconnected their TVs in their hotel rooms because you could use it to order food. That's how much they didn't want them to be able to order outside food.
Specifically so that they can get them more drunk.
Yes, because I've watched Love is Blind, and the most dramatic episodes are when they're at these resorts all meeting. And almost every single season consistently, I'm always grappling as a viewer if I'm contributing to the exploitation, because you can tell some of them, if not already struggling with alcohol, are being pushed in a direction where alcohol is such a huge factor in the show, and it's kind of scary to see.
Oh yeah, you're surrounded with it too. I mean, imagine if you were someone in recovery even.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a crazy environment.
Totally.
Another thing I have heard former people in Love is Blind say is that the actual like venue that they do the like first rounds, like the blind part in, is completely cut off from all light
Yeah, they
from
don't
the
know what time it
outside
is.
to make them not know what time it is, like what time is day
Yeah.
or what time is night, to I think also encourage drinking, right? Like if people know it's 11 a.m., they'll be like, oh, well, let me wait. But like when you're surrounded by people that are constantly drinking and you have no concept of time, you lose that sense of judgment.
Yeah, and it's kind of sinister when this came out in the lawsuit, because if you watch back in episodes when they're in the pods, there's no windows.
Yeah.
They don't know what time it is. And that's often used as a tactic as well when people are in solitary confinement, where even now people who are in solitary confinement have to have a window in their cell because it's considered inhumane for people to not know, like to have a circadian rhythm.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. So it's, if you think about it, reality stars aren't really seen as human in a way. But, and another thing is that Hartwell said that around 50 other contestants from various reality TV shows have reached out to him and Nick to show support, but are terrified to go public with it.
Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine too, especially like so many reality stars, I think after they go on reality, kind of get pushed into this career path too, because they're not taken seriously in anything else.
Exactly.
Like, you know, like you did reality TV, you're not thinking of all the hate Kim Kardashian got for decades and continues to get, which incentivizes them to go on more reality TV because it's like, what else can they do?
Yeah.
So I that makes total sense to me. And something else that he described when I watched this YouTube video that you sent me was like feeling like they didn't feel like humans. They felt like raw materials to make a product.
Yeah.
And I thought that was such a good analogy where they're like, we know what this viral formula is for a reality TV show. It's dating, it's alcohol consumption, it's drama, it's high pressure scenarios where the people can't escape each other.
Yeah.
And they're disregarding their humanity to ensure the quality of that product.
Yeah, and I always kind of question too, like the safety. I'm sure there's some safety nets in place, but specifically which shows that Netflix produces these reality shows where the cast members very shortly after meeting someone have to be in a hotel room or a private room with them. Whereas you think of shows like Love is Blind and it's almost comical that they're all in this room with like 10 beds, but I think it's a safety precaution because someone's less likely, if they have bad intentions, to get away with it if there's 20 witnesses versus just them and the word of the other person.
That's true.
And other people such as Francesca Fargo, she has talked about, she was on Too Hot to Handle and then Perfect Match. She talked about how she had a meltdown one day on Perfect Match because producers told her that she wouldn't have to share a room with her partner, and then she had to share a room with someone and she was terrified.
And it's also like, I really believe only a matter of time before some sort of physical or sexual harassment situation comes in. Like, especially when it's someone you've never met, you haven't even seen them before. Like,
especially
and now you have to share a bed with them for weeks in a confined hotel room where you're cut off from communication. You don't even have a TV to order food on. They're removing your phones. Like, if you actually have to cry for help, like, will they even come?
Yeah, and we're going to get into that in other shows as well because it gets dark. But now Thompson claims to have made, he did the math, around $7 an hour during filming, which is below minimum wage. And another thing that was really interesting is Hartwell says that Netflix filed W-2s on the cast's behalf. Why is this important? So that would categorize the stars of Love is Blind as full-time employees. But during filming, they were told that they were contracted employees so that they could go long hours without breaks or like overtime that typical full-time employees get.
Yeah. Also, if they were, because in theory, they're being filmed 24 hours a day or close to it. And that's not only overtime, but also starts to qualify for benefits, health insurance, possibly mental health benefits, which they clearly
needed. Yeah. So I think it's interesting that he even says in the video where him and Thompson are speaking out that either Netflix lied to them or the IRS. So
either way, it's illegal.
Yeah. And then one note is that the Thompson and Hartwell have launched UCAN, which is the Unscripted Cast Advocacy Network, which is going to come into play in next slides because there seems to be this uprising of reality stars who want to unionize.
That's interesting. I'd love to hear
and
your research on that.
Yeah, and I'm in contact with Nick Thompson's manager, and so I'm hoping to get him on my marketing podcast because I want to talk to him about this.
That would be an interesting
first-person perspective, yeah. Now, the next slide that was more so about Netflix and Love is Blind, and now I want to talk about Bravo, which is owned by NBC.
Okay.
So this got into the news cycle about 4 days ago because NBC and Bravo received a legal letter from current and former stars threatening a lawsuit.
Whoa.
Yeah. Now, they accuse the network of covering up sexual violence, condoning revenge porn, and exploiting minors. Now, I think the revenge porn thing is interesting because it seemed to have been a plot potentially in the previous season of Vanderpump Rules because one of the big storylines was that one of the girls found out her boyfriend was cheating via screenshots of a FaceTime where the girl was doing things with her boyfriend on FaceTime. But there was this question of like, did the girl know that she was being recorded? And that gets tricky as well.
Yeah. And this is something we've talked about before too, where I just really believe that when you tie your success to the downfall or negative circumstances of other people, it is inevitable at some point it will cross a line. And I feel like that is a great example of reality TV, right? Like something getting leaked, example, sex tape, is so good for views for them, but so bad for the person who doesn't consent to that.
At the other
and I think that they encourage it because they know it will monetize for them.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's like when you have a storyline around something extreme, it's like the Jake Paul vlogger days or David Dobrik, where kind of their demise when it came to vlogging specifically was that you had to get more and more extreme to be entertaining. You can't give away one Lamborghini now. You have to give away two. And
to every friend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyways, it's really being led by Bethenny Frankel. She's kind of a polarizing figure, but I would say out of all of the Bravo stars, she seems to have come out the most financially successful.
Okay.
She used her time on Real Housewives of New York to launch various brands, such as Skinny Girl Margarita. And she even said in her video that she knows that she was able to be successful from these shows, but she thinks speaking up could potentially help like the 99% of people who go into these and don't have any means to get out of it. Or specifically in the lawsuit, it said that former and current stars were mentally, physically, and financially victimized. I think the financial one is interesting as well because it seems like maybe they're making them financially dependent on the show, which we'll get into as well. And then NBC replied that they are committed to maintaining a safe and respectful workplace. And then Bethenny Frankel has expressed on social media that she wants to start a union for reality entertainers and that this was inspired by the current strikes with WGA and SAG-AFTRA.
Good. It seems like something like that definitely needs to happen. Or if SAG was, I don't know enough about unions to talk about like the legal specifics, but if SAG had a section for reality stars the same way they're building in a section for influencers.
Yeah. And there's a huge emphasis here, not just on the treatment during and after filming, but also on residuals because these shows make so much money for how low cost it is to produce. And the people featured, obviously they're agreeing to it, but they're not making any like rerun residuals, streaming residuals, anything like that. And so now I want to go into the metrics because, you know, some people might write off reality and reality stars, but I think that they make up a huge part of the industry. So some of the metrics here are that 90% of viewers watch with a phone or tablet, according to Nielsen. I think that's interesting because it lends to this note of like companionship over entertainment. Like, you're not going to watch Real Housewives in a movie theater, but you're going to watch it like on your phone while you're cooking dinner, which is what I do. And I think that lends to almost a closer bond with the people in the show than you might see when you're watching Florence Pugh on a movie screen.
Totally.
And then another one is that approximately 60% of new TV is made up of reality programming now.
Wow.
And I think we're going to see that surge because of the strike.
Yeah. Oh, definitely because of the strikes. That's what happened in 2008.
Yeah.
There was a huge boom of reality.
Exactly. Now, 69% of viewers watch through streaming platforms, which this is another note that is part of why actors and writers are striking, which is streaming doesn't give anyone syndication or rerun residuals because they can, count how many times 2.5 Men is doing a rerun on CBS, but they're not going to pay an actor every time Joe Schmo in Wisconsin watches an episode of Emily in Paris.
Oh, yeah. This is also something that former Disney Channel stars have actually come out and talked about too, was because even before Disney Plus was its own thing, Netflix had purchased a lot of the Disney Channel shows, like back in the day when Netflix was the only streamer. And when there was that bidding war going on, not even just counting streaming residuals, but like the actual purchase of the IP, they don't get any percentage of that either. Then Disney Channel for Disney Plus bought it back, some of them. And they didn't even, so it's now like changed hands twice and they're still
no money,
getting nothing.
And I think that if SAG and WGA is able to come to an agreement where stars get streaming residuals, we could see something similar maybe happen for reality stars.
Yeah, another fascinating thing I actually learned about streaming residuals specifically is a big reason these studios don't want to start giving residuals was because then that would make it public information how much views every shows get. Because right now they are very picky and choosy with how well things do. Like you'll see how many views Stranger Things gets or how many views Wednesday gets. But a great example was Amazon Prime released a Lord of the Rings show, and it was their most expensive show of all time. So they put out a statement that said like episode 1 is our most viewed thing of all time, blah, 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 which is true. But the drop off from episode 1 to episode 2 made it lose more money than they've ever lost on anything. But they don't publicize that because the stock price will go up if we say we had our most viral premiere in history. So that's a big reason they don't want to give residual information, is because they want to be able to hide it from their shareholders.
Oh, they want to be able to manipulate the media coverage around the shows.
Yep.
Interesting. Because Nielsen can see how many people tuned into a cable show in 2001.
Exactly.
But Nielsen maybe can't see how many people stream something on Netflix.
Exactly. Or the actors can't ask for increases and raises and stuff based off the performance of the show if they don't know it.
Wow. Another thing is reality TV stars are paid on average $1,700 a week. And if that's pre-tax, they're probably only looking at around like $1,200 if they're in California. And I'm not an attorney or a accountant. But I just think that's interesting because say you're on a show and you only film for 5 weeks, you're only making $5,000 for a show that's going to be seen by millions. So especially if you think about like how much actors are paid a week for like if you're a star of a TV show like Millie Bobby Brown, imagine how much she gets paid for Stranger Things, and Stranger Things is bringing in the same numbers as like a season of Love is Blind. The stars of Love is Blind are not getting what Millie Bobby Brown is getting. And of course there's reasons, like Millie Bobby Brown has a craft, like she's like doing a certain skill set. But I do think it's just an interesting comparison. In fact, Netflix had a show called Perfect Match where they brought together reality stars from other shows.
I watched it.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting because a couple of the contestants went on the Nick Viall podcast after the show aired, and the two people that won were Georgia and Dom, and they got into this public feud after. But Georgia on the Nick Viall podcast, this wasn't the point of her conversation, but when she said it, I thought it was interesting that her and Dom were texting about how they wanted to ask Netflix for their prize money to be more than $5,000 each. And I was like, full stop. I was like, they only got $5,000.
Yeah, that's nothing.
That is, and I'm sure they got money for going on the show, but like the fact that they were like fighting tooth and nail over $5,000 tells me they weren't getting paid that. Another thing is, this is what's really fascinating. So the average budget of a production for a reality TV show is between $100,000 to $500,000.
Which is nothing.
Nothing. And I'm going to compare it to Stranger Things.
Yeah.
The average cost of one singular episode for Stranger Things, can you guess?
I mean, it's got to be multiple million.
$30 million for one episode, not a season. One episode of Stranger Things, $30 million.
That's insane. Like an insane gap.
Yeah. So it costs them so little money to produce reality TV.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we're going to see a surge of it.
They can make like 300 reality shows for every one season of Stranger Things.
Exactly. So and then the fact though that now reality TV makes up 60% of new programming.
Yeah.
There's no reason why streaming platforms aren't going to lean into reality TV in the next couple of years, even more than they already do. Now, the last metric here is that 40% of viewers report it as a guilty pleasure. Now, the reason this is interesting to me is because I think it explains the negative view that the general public has on reality stars.
Yeah.
Is like, it's something embarrassing that they look up to them or that they enjoy the stuff that they create.
Totally. I also feel like it's really specifically female reality stars.
Yeah.
Like I've always said, like, you're
so right.
Never, not once have I heard anyone shit on Harry Jowsey
ever
for going on reality TV, but like every woman is like called talentless.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's such a great point you bring up. And for anyone listening on the podcast, I got these stats via it's gitnux.com. It's a bunch of journalists that verify a bunch of statistics. So I'll link that out in the description. But now scrolling down, we're going to go into examples of exploitation. And then the next slide will be examples of success, because I don't want to only talk about the negative.
Okay.
Okay, now examples of exploitation. Trigger warning for this, it's going to be domestic violence, suicide, all of the above. Just check all of the above boxes. But like, if you're sensitive right now or in a bad place, I would skip this slide. Now, I want to talk about Bravo and Real Housewives exploitation, which there was one episode of Real Housewives of Beverly Hills where Denise Richards, she denies it, so you never really know, but she was outed on live TV by her castmates.
Yeah. You mean like as part of the LGBTQ plus community?
Yes. And it was done so awful. Like, she was at a dinner and another castmate who had been fired previously and was no longer in the show, but like was inching her way back, Brandy.
Okay.
She claimed to have hooked up with Denise Richards. And then she told the other castmates, and then the castmates brought it up to Denise at dinner, and they set Denise up allegedly for I mean, obviously it's already humiliating, but the cast members off camera, kind of, I think in a bullying way, told Denise Richards that if you ever want to break the fourth wall and like tell them to stop filming, you say bravo, bravo, bravo.
Okay.
Odd, but like, so in the scene, they say to Denise Richards, like, we know that you hooked up with Brandi Glanville. And then they were also bringing up her kids and stuff. And Denise Richards like looks at the camera and goes, it's like an iconic line now, but she goes, bravo, bravo, fucking bravo. And they keep filming. So she's like waiting for them to stop filming.
So that's not even like, I bet in the contract. I bet it's just like, oh, if you say that, we'll stop. But
right,
like,
the seasoned cast member said that to her, I think to humiliate her. Also, my guess is they knew that they were about to do something to her that would like have her break the fourth wall.
Wow.
So, and you can tell she had just gotten married, like she had young kids. I think that if she was not, whether she is or not, it was like, she's never said, but it was just like, I think that there's certain things that are off topic.
Oh, yeah. Because I mean, I think that even becomes a safety concern for some people.
Yeah.
Like she might have a supportive and safe family. You never know. But there are a lot of people out there who don't.
Yeah.
And that is like a genuine safety violence concern.
Yes. 100%. Another one, she's like one of the worst cast members in my opinion. But there's one specific scene with Vicky Gunvalson from Real Housewives of Orange County that I don't think should have ever made it to air.
Okay.
And it's this scene where they're at like a dinner party at her house and she gets a phone call. She goes into like the laundry room area, is on the phone and gets word that her mom just died. And they keep filming. And it's like, it gives me chills. It's one of the most upsetting pieces of television I've ever seen, because this is clearly someone who's like not there. Like she was having a panic attack. Everyone was comforting her. And I mean, she still continues to work with Bravo. She's trying to come back on the show. So I don't think that she views it as bad blood, but I just feel like there's certain things that shouldn't be filmed and aired to millions.
Oh, as someone who has lost a parent themselves, I can't even remember what the first things I said the morning I found out. Nor do I remember like the first 2 hours. I just remember rushing to my dad's house.
Yeah.
And I don't want that filmed, especially one, for other people to see, two, for me to relive. Like, I'm very happy that that's not an experience I have to relive. And two, like, I really think that there should be a law when filming reality TV for no matter where they're filming, there always needs to be like one designated room to where if somebody walks into that room, it is cameras off, mics off the record. Like, they need like a safe room, because you never know when you're going to get a phone call about your parent dying. Yeah. And like, if I'm like, oh, this is serious, I need to go to this room, it needs to be like instant cut.
Yeah. There needs to be like a safe word almost for them. And it was so sad because in the scene, she kept just being like, she kept saying, who's going to worry about me? Okay, another one. Now, this one is dark in a different way. Michael Darby from Real Housewives of Potomac. Now, this is all alleged because he sued people, but he is a cast member on Real Housewives of Potomac, and he's the husband of Ashley Darby, one of the girls. His net worth is around $20 million. So he's a real estate developer in like the tri-state area. So like any big building in Virginia, DC is probably from him. Now, he, in the first season, there was like writing on the wall because he grabbed the butt of one of the girls' boyfriends at like a party. And then they kind of like laughed it off as like, not a big deal. Like he was joking. But then a couple seasons later, some of the production crew from Bravo filed a police report against him because he was allegedly sexually harassing and assaulting cameramen and producers during filming. And Bravo allowed him to stay on the show after this and never fired him. And the people that were a part of the police filing ended up dropping it, which makes you wonder if something happened under the table. I'm not sure. This is alleged. Yeah. But there's multiple like videos of him doing this.
I think there is this weird note of heteronormativity in sexual harassment cases where if it's like guy on guy or girl on girl, especially if they're not somebody who's out, the default is to assume, oh, it's just a joke. Yeah. And regardless if it is a joke or not acceptable. You know what I mean? Even if they was a perfectly straight man and another perfectly straight man, like you can't just grab someone's butt like that. Like that's, especially on TV, like it's not acceptable. And I think too that because, 90% of people are straight, like mathematically, they just assume, oh, 90% of the time it's just a joke. Oh, 90% of the time it's not actual harassment, blah, blah, blah. But like, yes, it is. And also you never know. Yeah. So you need to be taking every situation that seriously.
Yeah. And like, how do the employees feel that the employer continued to work with and bring him onto set, knowing that he had a pattern over multiple seasons of this behavior? And I think also the fact that it was male victims is part of why it got brushed under the rug. Now, another one is Candy from Real Housewives of Atlanta. There was a season where she was falsely accused by another castmate of trying to drug and assault another, Portia. And that was not true. It was just a storyline that the producers allowed the other castmates to run with.
Whoa. That's like slander territory.
100%.
Because that's insinuating a crime.
Right. And then it kind of brings up this notion of like, with these reality shows and the reality stars, do they feel this pressure that every season they have to have a more and more extreme storyline that like then they start resorting to almost criminal storylines or like untrue storylines that are so extreme that they could ruin someone's life.
Yeah, or it's just that they always allow it.
Yes.
Like even if they don't perpetuate it, like you never know, it's always allowed. It's always, they're always fanning the flame, even if they're not the one igniting it themselves.
Totally. And then this could potentially be one of the darkest ones that people often reference, which was that Taylor Armstrong, she was on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And there's actually a podcast about like the ethics of reality shows called Unreal. And they interviewed Taylor Armstrong, but she was in the first 2 seasons. And it was kind of this open secret and even a storyline in the show that she was being abused by her husband. Yeah. And she has said too, like she never felt like producers put her in that position. If anything, she was close to them and they would even offer like some days to get her a hotel room if they noticed during filming it was escalating. And so I do think that there is she actually has even said that she felt like being on TV and the cameras being there gave her some protection.
Interesting.
Because he couldn't do it when the camera, so she wanted the cameras to be there.
Yeah.
And then also she hoped that the show would give her like financial leverage to leave. And so and then what ended up happening was after the second season, when it fully came out that he was abusing her, her husband ended up committing suicide.
Whoa.
So it was just a dark storyline through and through.
Yeah.
And I think that it is this note that like sometimes reality TV, I do think they're liable for certain things in protecting cast, but I also sometimes wonder if like their job truly is to just record humanity. And it's like there was no hero at the end of the story. There was no triumph. It was just like, this is what happens. Like,
yeah.
And I mean, she said that, yeah, she didn't really feel like it's Bravo's fault that it was happening, but there's specifically a scene where they're at an all white party and it's the photo here and her husband get in the limo. And you just know like that something bad was going to happen to her. So, yeah.
I don't know. I also wonder, like, do producers of reality TV have an obligation to report things like that if there is like explicit crime or violence going on? Because I know like therapists have to report that,
like mandated reporters.
Yeah, like especially if you catch it on camera or you catch, you know, escalation of it on camera, that I think would be a good thing at least to implement of like, hey, this is we caught this.
Yeah, I think part of the issue is that because there's adults involved, is like they usually mandated reporters are often for children because they can't advocate. But like if they, you know, and also I think like production is in this position where if they do escalate it, you also risk putting that person in more danger.
Exactly. Or you risk losing your own job.
Right.
You know, I'm sure there's always someone who's like, but it's so good for views.
Yeah,
blah, blah, blah.
exactly.
So, but again, that's when legal action needs to take in because then that way it's not on anybody's fault.
Yeah.
It's, you know, a union law or something like that.
Totally. Now, another example of exploitation comes from MTV shows, which there's this like cursed show called Are You the One that like so many bad things have happened on this show. And it kind of was like Love Island where all of these singles get together in a house and they have to figure out like, depending on the matchmaking assessment they did, like which person in the house is their match kind of thing.
Okay.
So there's one cast member from the Are You the One show, Connor Smith, who he actually, it's kind of freaky too, because he was one of the ones that matched with a girl early. So if you match with someone, you have to go to like an offsite house where you stay for the last couple weeks while they're filming. And so she was the one who went with him to that house and they were partnered up. But it came out later after he left the show. He was arrested for sexually assaulting a 16-year-old girl he met online. Like, which makes me think like maybe the producers didn't know when he went on the show, but like, there's people in all professions that end up getting arrested for awful things, but it does just bring up this case to me of like, when you have people in rooms alone on these shows, like how do you know that people are protected from people like that who are obviously wanting to be on the show?
Exactly. And also they take their phones away.
Yes. So they can't call for help.
Yeah, like that's insane.
Right. And so that leads to another thing from Are You the One where one cast member, Gianna, from season 5, she came out and said, and they ended up stopping filming this season because of it. So she was on medication that she got before she went on the show, and she was not supposed to be taking it after she'd been drinking. So typically they would give her the medication earlier in the morning. Now, she claims that she was drinking that day and she ended up having an altercation with another cast member. And then she was pulled into a room with producers who like made her take her medication to like calm her down.
Okay.
She ends up like blacking out and going unconscious. And I'm sure, as you can guess, she was assaulted that night by another cast member. So they stopped filming that season because of this. And it's like, first of all, for a show that's being 24/7 filmed, how is no one stopping that?
Yeah, and again, another example of where I think there needs to be some sort of medical professional
on site.
On call.
Yeah, or like watching. They need to have people who are watching, who are trained in recognizing certain like escalation of situations.
Yeah.
And now another MTV show that just has a history of this is Teen Mom. Of course, you have like Ryan Edwards, who there's a scene that Teen Mom fans often reference where he is a dad of one of the kids on the show, and he was driving to his wedding. So his fiance is like in the car with him, and he's clearly on drugs. I mean, as someone who's been close to someone battling a heroin addiction, like my guess would be he was on heroin, because you can see in the video he's driving and his eyes are like going like this and he's falling asleep and swerving. And one, I think producers maybe didn't know that was happening because you could tell it was being filmed from like a GoPro.
Yeah.
But I also think producers should have not aired that because that's clearly someone who's like not in a good place and needs help, not to have that filmed for millions to see.
Yeah.
And then another one is obviously Janelle Edwards. She's like notorious in the teen mom world. And her husband, David Eason, there was a lot of things that they had done wrong, but one was allegedly the physical abuse of one of their sons, Kaiser, on camera, which happened often. And he was like, that son was from one of her ex-boyfriends. And so he looked like the ex-boyfriend. And so I think there was this weird like emotional disconnect that they had. And there's videos of like, you know, David pulling his arm or like clearly escalating violence towards these children. And it appears, in my opinion, that no one stepped in to be like, hey, this is wrong.
Again, I think there needs to be something built in where people have this obligation to report it.
Yes.
Because also then I feel like if once that law that makes an obligation to report it is built in, we would then be able to hold production companies responsible for blatantly ignoring it.
Ignoring it, yes.
You know what I mean?
Totally. And then another one is Amber Portwood, who is on Teen Mom. And in one of her first seasons, she's on camera physically abusing her partner Gary like multiple times, hitting him. She ended up going to prison, like hitting him, abusing him. And again, like why I think that there's certain things that just shouldn't be like, if it is caught on camera, that needs to go to authorities, not the network. like the producers need to be in the police off, like at the police station, not, you know, selling it to MTV for $1 million or whatever. Like it's just, again, the abuse of a man as well, I think wasn't taken seriously because it was her partner. And then the last one is CBS, which the Big Brother, I think also because it's a show that's filmed 24/7 and they're isolated in this house, that lends to also like extreme behavior because it's an extreme situation. And so there's one specific episode with Angie Bowie. This is Big Brother Celebrity in the UK. And so Angie Bowie, and she's the former wife of David Bowie. So they'd been divorced. But while she was filming, she gets word that her late husband, David Bowie, had died. And now she tells another castmate, Tiffany Pollard, also known as I Love New York. She's like a meme. Like she's pretty famous, this Tiffany Pollard. And they told her that David had died. Tiffany, for whatever reason, interpreted this as David, one of the older castmates in the house, died. Oh. So she has like a freak out because she's like, David just died, thinking David, the guy in the house. I don't know why no one stopped her at any point to be like, wait, it's not this one.
Again, I think it's because the
drama.
Yeah, it's like when you are monetizing the downfall of somebody, it is inevitable that there will be a conflict of interest.
Yes.
Exhibit 9752.
Exactly. And it ended up coming out that it was that he was just taking a nap. But then Tiffany Pollard later started selling David is Dead shirts, but then had to pull them because 3 months later, the guy actually died. David just did die. So that was just like, that one's a more like light one compared to what we're going to get into. And then the other one is on Big Brother Spain, a contestant, Carlota Prado. She was R-worded while she was drunk and passed out. They filmed it. So it's 24/7 filming. So it was filmed while the clip never made it to air. She had to watch the video back in the diary room. So the producers were like, did you know this happened last night? And she had to beg them to stop playing the footage. Now, my question is, thank God it didn't air, but why did no one step in?
Exactly.
Like, this show is where they're filming people 24/7. You're telling me there isn't someone who like was watching who could have raised they need like an alarm bell in the house.
There needs to be a legal obligation for these people.
Yes. Yeah. And then the last one is a contestant on Big Brother season 2 in America, Justin Sebick. He was kissing a fellow castmate only to pull a knife on her, put it to her neck, and ask if she would be mad if he killed her. He ends up obviously getting removed from the show, but then, by no surprise to anyone, he was later charged with choking his girlfriend.
Yep.
So it's like, how are these people like making it through? I mean, I guess anyone can be in a profession and they're secretly an awful person.
I mean, I think it's because they scout people who they think will make great TV.
Extreme
and those people
behavior.
are pretty extreme and not the most stable.
Yeah. And then CBS honorable mention was that on Survivor one year, there was a contestant who was transgender who was not out about this, but they were outed by another cast member at like one of the where they vote someone off. The other crew and cast had this person's back, but my question is like, should it have aired?
No, exactly. It's another reason. Like, trans people experience some of the most violence of any demographic in the U.S. Like, that is a safety concern.
Exactly. And now I want to go into examples of success because there's also I don't want to only talk about the bad. There's a reason I enjoy reality TV. There's a reason people watch it. One would be like One Direction. They were on the X Factor, and of course, one of the biggest boy bands of our time. I also think part of their success is that they didn't actually win, so I feel like they weren't tied to any contracts.
Yeah, and also specifically, a lot of these singing competitions, like American Idol, like X Factor, are designed where there is like a greater incentive for winning. Like what you're talking about with Perfect Match, where they get $5,000. Like what you win for American Idol is like a very lucrative music contract, as well as like you are guaranteed to have an exponential amount of like press. People viewing you, doing your craft that you are trying to make a living out of.
Yeah, and I think also with talent shows, there's an incentive for the networks to want that person to be successful.
Right.
So that
it reflects better on the show.
Yeah. Another one I think is Ariana Madix is a really great example of like someone who came out of a reality show, I think better, at least this last season of Vanderpump Rules.
Right.
Obviously she went through something awful to get there. I personally think, so she's currently filming season 11 and it's reported that cast members and crew are now turning on her, even though she was just America's sweetheart. I think she should have walked away from Vanderpump Rules after last season. I think she's bigger than it. Really? I think she made a mistake by going back to the show.
I mean, I bet they offered her an insane amount of money.
Yeah.
Is why. But yeah, I don't know. Also, but like, what would she have transferred into?
Well, she's going to be on Dancing with the Stars.
Okay. That's a good move for her.
Yeah. It's reported that she made over $1 million in the months following the scandal breaking from brand deals. I just think that like she's like the people's Princess Diana right now.
No, she really is.
And I feel like you're equal to your enemies. So her continuing to go on Vanderpump Rules means that she's on the same level as the people that hurt her.
Yeah. I mean, I think she could have totally launched a podcast.
I know.
It's like the easiest. The reality star to podcast pipeline is so strong.
Yeah.
Also, Sheena from the show already has a podcast.
Oh, yeah. Laura.
But I felt like it would have been interesting for her, one, to talk about it if she was willing. And two, I think it would have been a cool opportunity if she was, again, willing to use it to highlight other people in the spotlight who have been cheated on. Yeah. And to talk about how the media glamorizes it. So like two people who have had to go through cheating scandals in the public eye, to sit down and talk about how it impacted their life would be very interesting.
Yeah, I think she could have a really interesting angle there. And then, of course, like you have Kelly Clarkson, who won the first season of American Idol. I also think back then, that was before networks understood the power of these shows. And so, like, I think she obviously is still successful to this day, has her own show. And I think she benefited from the networks not yet having the infrastructure to, like, trap these stars into their kind of hold.
Yes, and specifically, American Idol Season 1 was such a hit phenomenon. It's like what you said earlier. I think they really pushed her to be successful because they knew if we make Kelly Clarkson the poster child of success, it means we can have 10 other American Idol seasons after this, because everybody will go on to be the next Kelly Clarkson.
To try to attain, yeah. And now the next slide is the formula for drama, which this is in my opinion. I think that part of it is that, one, they need really high stakes. So you need like people to win a certain amount of money. And usually people who are fighting for money, like 100K, which is life changing, they're not the people that have the financial leverage in the outside world. So like there's a reason that people get desperate and sign up for these reality shows.
Yeah.
Another one is extreme conditions. You either have that from manufactured conditions, like with Big Brother, where there's certain like situations where if you lose a challenge, you have to eat what's known as slop, which is like bland oatmeal for like a week, and then you have to like sleep in a room with like concrete beds and like industrial lighting. So you have manufactured conditions. Or when it shows like Jersey Shore or Vanderpump Rules where they're out in the real world, they're just being fed so much alcohol that it creates an extreme response to anything they're doing.
Yeah, another thing I would actually add to this is like intentional competition. I feel like all reality, like The Bachelor or Bachelorette is literally a tournament bracket for a man or a woman.
Yeah,
you know
and
what
I
mean?
would say that's like high stakes. Like it's not money, it's marriage.
That's
or like,
true. That's a good one. But also I feel like they even implement these like mini challenges along the way too to instigate infighting.
Yes,
like they
you're so
literally
right.
are trying to like, we need to have these two people compete against each other because then one person will lose and that will make them upset.
Totally. And then I think another one is caricatures. So shows don't always thrive when they show someone who's multidimensional, but rather they thrive, especially if it's a cast of like 10 or more people. They have to rely on caricatures or like one person being the villain, one person being the good guy. And there's no room for like people in real life have elasticity. We're multidimensional.
Right.
But like in these shows, you're also rewarded as a cast member for leaning into being a one-dimensional caricature.
Yeah, and I feel like they also intentionally edit people that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they're really going to highlight this one specific side of them when they need it for the plot.
Exactly. And now the last slide, or the second to last one, which is finances. I think this is a really big conversation right now. Kristen Dowdy from Vanderpump Rules was on the Josh Peck podcast, and I think she brought up something interesting. But it's essentially about like, are they deserving of residuals? Now, for comparison, sitcoms are a great example of like successful residuals in syndication. Charlie Sheen specifically on 2.5 Men, it's estimated from Fox that he made about $100 million from reruns and royalties alone. To put into perspective how much money he was making, the network paid him $27 million to sell his profit participation rights. So how much money was the network losing by giving him residuals from the show running that they paid him $27 million to cut out his stake of the 2.5
Yeah, to essentially buy him out.
Yes. So think about that. And now we're going to compare it to Vanderpump Rules. Now, Vanderpump Rules is the most watched cable series in the 18 to 49 demo. That's a huge demo. That's like so many people.
Yeah.
And also the Vanderpump Rules reunion part 3 of the last season was the best first day viewing ever for any NBC Universal Entertainment series on the platform. And they're not getting paid the same that like actors are or directors are.
Yeah.
And they're putting on a show, whether you like it or not. And Kristen Dowdy was, when she was on Josh Peck's podcast, she was talking about how much the cast made. It's estimated they only made around $10,000 for the first season, which is, I know myself, I know people that watch the first season of Vanderpump Rules over and over and over again. It's just fascinating. Now they can make on average of like $25,000 per episode, according to Cosmo. So they are making a little more. But I do think that if actors and writers are able to negotiate a way for them to get streaming residuals, reality stars are going to start negotiating as well.
Yeah, and going back to your point about like rewatching season 1, that's the entire reason structures like residuals exist.
Yeah.
It's to account for the fact that a show's potential popularity is not necessarily measurable. So there is this baked in layer of compensation so that if something escalates, you are rewarded for that.
Exactly. Because they don't always know. It's like, a 5% chance probably that your show's going to be successful.
Right.
Now, the last slide, which is just like conclusions and predictions, and this is kind of what I came to, but I encourage people to come to their own and then comment down below and let us know if you're on YouTube. Now, reality TV is a great mirror into humanity and society at that moment. I think it's why it's so fascinating. I always say reality is stranger than fiction. Like some of the storylines that I see on reality shows are way more fascinating than some of the best scripted TV I've ever seen.
Yeah.
You just can't predict human behavior all the time.
I also really like what you said. I do feel like it really is this window in, like, it feels like a time capsule.
Exactly.
Like, I really feel like nothing captures, like, 2010, like Keeping Up with the Kardashians.
Exactly, like what people cared about
Paris
at the time.
and what was
The Sweet Life, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like in the early 2000s. And like although those shows are riddled with problems, they are kind of testaments to what media looked like at that time.
And Real Housewives is very similar. But also, like, people say Big Brother is kind of this like cataclysm of whatever's happening in society at the moment. So like the people that are on the show become like extreme versions of demographics within American society, and they represent those demographics. So like around 2016, like in the years during Trump's presidency, there was a lot of conversation in Big Brother around racial discrimination. You know, one group that was in all black members band together, and they were the first ever like cast of all 4 black members to make it to the end of Big Brother that season. And they were like an example of what was happening outside of the walls of Big Brother, of people, the George Floyd protest, people coming together. So Big Brother is like an extreme example of whatever's happening outside.
Right.
Now, are producers responsible for showing the best parts of humanity or the honest parts of humanity? Like technically, in a way, they are kind of just like journalists. Like they can't always push story. I mean, they do.
Yeah.
But it's like, are they there to like be the hero, or are they there to just document what's happening?
I would even go as far to say they're there to like perpetuate the villainy.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? And also, I think whenever you talk about something like this too, it's never the responsibility of one cameraman. Like that's probably a PA getting paid barely anything, and they don't have the autonomy to choose what gets recorded and what doesn't.
Or the bird's eye view to understand what's going to happen.
Exactly. But I do think that doesn't excuse them for there being no accountability whatsoever.
Yeah. And I do think that's why they need resources on set who have no financial incentive in the success of the show, but all they are there is to advocate for the people being filmed.
Yeah.
Now, another one is that, like, I think shows can exploit people while also opening doors for them they wouldn't have otherwise. Like, it's not black and white. It's why Bethenny Frankel is one of the most successful financially from Bravo, and yet she's leading the charge. It's like a gray area. Another one is that I think with American culture, Americans specifically seem really fascinated by fame, but they hate those who pursue it. It's this weird thing that happens.
Yeah.
And reality TV is this obsession for Americans, but that doesn't mean it translates into admiration.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. I think that reality TV stars experience this love to hate, hate to love phenomenon where they're the target of such criticism, but for some reason people can never look away from it.
Yeah.
Kind of because they enjoy criticizing them.
Yeah. And another thing, which I've said before in other contexts, but like fame can be a type of trauma. And I think we learn that with reality stuff.
Especially when you don't get to choose what is being aired or what you get famous for. Like, it's one thing if you release a song, you wrote every word to the song, you were there singing it yourself, and then you perform it yourself. It's another thing when it's like you were filmed for 24 hours for 14 days in a row. You can't even remember half the things you said. Then it gets edited over 9 months, and then one day you wake up and like everybody knows who you are. You know, it and that can be a great thing for some people, and it's proven to be a great thing. But I think it's also important to acknowledge how that can be a type of trauma. Right.
And now my predictions for reality TV is that I think obviously reality stars are going to begin to form unions and advocate for better treatment. You know, what we're seeing with the Love is Blind stars and Bravo stars, it's really only the beginning.
Yeah.
I think that we're going to see a move away from excessive alcohol consumption on these shows. We may even see, in my prediction, we may even see some stars sue or speak out about exploitation during or triggering of an addiction.
Yeah.
Like, there's clearly a lot of drug use that happens on some shows as well, where they're not in a controlled environment like a house. And can that person come out 10 years from now and say they were filming me when they knew that I had an addiction?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Another one is I think shows seem to be moving away from veteran or legacy stars as a way to side skirt conversations around residuals. So we saw that recently with Real Housewives of New York is one of Bravo's biggest franchises, and they were trying to relaunch it with the OG cast, but it fell through because of contract negotiations. So they had to relaunch the show with an all new cast.
Interesting. I also think too, that's why a lot of these reality shows, they design the entire premise to be a rotating cast structure. Like, I think The Bachelor and Bachelorette is such a perfect example of like, they get their peak of fame the last episode, but then once that's done, they're done.
And
you
once
know?
the new season comes out, then they're especially
Yeah, and then they take one person to like launch the success of the next season. So they do have to give a little something to that one person, but after that, they're also done.
Exactly.
You know, they're intentionally designing it to write people out.
Yeah, totally. And now another one is that we're about to see a boom of reality TV that mirrors what we saw in 2007 and 2008 during the previous writer's strike. 2007 to 2008 is when we saw the launch of multiple Real Housewives franchises, and shows like Keeping Up with the Kardashians were born.
Yeah, I think that I totally agree with you. Also, it's so clear how much Netflix has been investing into it already. And it's because it's so cheap to produce that it doesn't really even need to perform as well. Like the barrier for success to reach profit margin is significantly lower, which is why they keep churning them out. I also think that they're making this intentional, like almost like reality show cinematic universe. Like I think that was like the success of Perfect Match.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Is they're trying to like trap all these people into it.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think it's important to distinguish too that I don't hate reality TV, and I'm not saying people shouldn't watch reality TV. I actually rather enjoy reality TV, but I think at least to me, the big takeaway from this is that people should, one, view them as human beings, and two, like protect them as human beings the same way we protect actors.
Or even just employees. I always think they're not seen as employees at times.
Absolutely. That's such a great point.
Yeah. So that was our thoughts on this. If you guys have any thoughts, definitely comment down below if you're on YouTube. If not, you guys can leave us a rating wherever you listen and leave your thoughts there as well.
Please. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.